Good evening, folks, and welcome back. It's the DeFi Collective with Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell, where we go into depth on all things having to do with decentralized finance, whether it be cryptocurrency, whether it be decentralized finance, whether it be liquidity pools, the list goes on and on. And today we have a great show. We're going to be talking about the Ethereum merge. If it sounds like a Martian space flick, we'll clarify it for you shortly. But as we get started, I just want to let you know that we cover subjects that we have requests for. And we've had a few people who were interested in knowing what the Ethereum merge actually is. Again, we can be reached at show@thedeficollective.com to let us know your thoughts. And we certainly appreciate all feedback. Again, it's show@thedeficollective.com. So let's get going. Ethereum. Ethereum. I know when I first heard the word Ethereum a few years ago, I said, well, that sounds like uranium or plutonium or something. It's like an
Right.
element that somebody created. But
Yeah.
Ethereum, Alex, give us a little background on Ethereum. Ethereum is a blockchain that you can use to build different things on. NFTs. You can build other cryptocurrency on it. So give us a little background on Ethereum, and then we're going to tell you what the merge means, and we'll talk a little bit too today about regulation, because if you've been watching the news lately, the government really wants to get a handle on this before it gets out of hand. A lot of places have been going out of business. A lot of people have been losing money, and I was telling Alex about an elderly uncle I had a few years back who said he remembers when airplane companies were not regulated, and he said basically when you got on an airplane you were taking a chance. So I think that's kind of where we are now with cryptocurrency. So
Right.
regulation isn't always a bad thing. So Alex,
No.
kick it off. What is this Ethereum?
So Ethereum was kind of born out of the earlier days of crypto. You had Bitcoin, but a lot of the Bitcoin community was talking about, well, okay, we have Bitcoin, now what, right? What comes next? And Vitalik, the guy who founded Ethereum, he was kind of in that group of people. He was very young at that point, didn't have a ton of money, and he was sort of talking about, the idea of smart contracts was coming up. There was talking about this idea of not just transacting this idea of money or value, but what if you transacted code itself? Like, what if you could run code in a decentralized way on these networks? And in those earlier days, the Bitcoin guys kind of laughed Vitalik off. They're like, no, that's dumb. And at some point, I think Vitalik tried to do it with Ripple too, and Ripple kind of laughed at him. And so at some point, he and the other co-founders of Ethereum came together and started Ethereum. And the point of Ethereum, if you think of Bitcoin kind of like an app, um, that is a storage of wealth. It's an app for storage of wealth. Ethereum is sort of like the app store. It's sort of like this platform that allows the deployment of smart contracts, which are just code. And so it's a deployment of code onto the network, and that code can result in transactions. Okay, so you could have code that deploys, tokens. You could mint tokens out of the code. You could have code that does anything, and it's transparent, it's visible, and the code, just like any tokens that result from it, is deployed as a token itself onto the network, and then it can get run with signature. You sign and it runs and it produces some sort of result. Okay, so that means is you can build what are known as dApps, or decentralized apps, decentralized applications, on the Ethereum network, and they can run as their own applications on the network. And this is how you've come to see all sorts of other tokens that are on the Ethereum network. Those are called ERC20s.
Mm-hmm.
So you have other tokens like Chainlink, Aave, a lot of the DeFi protocols.
Mm-hmm.
Those are ERC20 tokens and entire decentralized apps that are running on the Ethereum network, but they're still their own ecosystem because of the way that code runs on the Ethereum network.
Okay. All right. So the Ethereum network is sort of like a computer that you can run a program on, so to speak.
Right. Decentralized
Yeah, a
computers. Yeah.
decentralized computer that you can run a program on.
Yep.
And you know, one of the things, particular to Ethereum and Bitcoin, is that there is a process called mining coins. When complex mathematical problems are solved by these supercomputers, and you create a new block in the blockchain.
Right.
And for doing that, you get compensated. So if you can
Right.
afford to, 12 supercomputers and a place to put them, you can make some money. One of the problems they've been running into is this takes up, it requires a vast amount of energy. I mean,
Right.
it requires a lot of energy, and it's very noisy. There was a
Yep.
gentleman who was from West Virginia, and he retired to the mountains of West Virginia so he could hunt and fish and, just goof off in his lodge, him and his wife. And he said he has no quiet because someone started a mine, and I guess
Yeah.
because it uses so much energy, the fans have to run 24/7.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's and I've never heard it, but from what I hear from other people, it's pretty loud.
Yeah. The mining
Uh,
rigs are very loud, especially because to make it profitable,
mhm.
especially as individuals, you have to have a lot of them. And
Yeah,
so
you have to
you
have
have all these mining rigs together. You're dealing with ventilation concerns, you're dealing with energy concerns, right? You're sort of
you
it's a
have to
big,
keep them cool.
yeah, you got to keep
Yeah.
them cool. You're dealing with heat, right? So this is a big issue. Um, Historically, it's been a big issue for Ethereum because Ethereum is proof of work, and or it was proof of work like Bitcoin. Now Bitcoin's proof of work because it sort of needs to be. The idea that hard work produces the value of this de-inflationary token, that kind of makes sense. Now, that wasn't designed for everyday exchange, or at this point, we don't think it should be.
Hmm.
So even Bitcoin has created second layers that are for everyday exchange, and they eventually sync up with layer one.
Hmm.
So Bitcoin would theoretically only need to process transactions every so often
Hmm.
on the first layer, and you could have a bunch of activity on a second layer that gets synced down with the original blockchain. So there's even Bitcoin is looking for ways to make this more efficient.
Right.
And Ethereum's solution was to completely change the consensus mechanism itself, because the Ethereum token is not money. It's not a currency. It's essentially a commodity in terms of how you exchange the goods and services of those decentralized apps, and how you
Hmm.
deploy those things and work with those, with that deployment of code, and how you also then incentivize mining, right? Because you still need miners to be incentivized to do so. So what they did is they went from proof of work as a consensus mechanism, which is where the entire network essentially races to complete the mathematical equation first.
Hmm.
Um, and they moved to proof of stake, where only one miner does it at a time.
Hmm.
So this is why it became 99.9999% more energy efficient, is because now you have, instead of the entire network for each transaction working, you have one
Yeah.
validator per transaction
And
working.
just to show you, excuse me for hopping in, and just to show you what the implications of that are, where you would have one miner, now 2,000 miners use the same energy that one miner used to use.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 1/2000th as energy efficient. It uses 1/2000th as much energy, and this changes all kind of things,
Yeah.
because one of the big knocks on Bitcoin and Ethereum was that it was too, used too much power,
Right.
and you had to burn coal or, nuclear power. You had to get power from somewhere, and it used a lot of energy, and so
Yeah.
this seems to have, made some great strides, because now one miner, 2,000 miners can use the same energy as one miner. So,
Right.
yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted
And
to show
now it's important to note that Ethereum wasn't the first to do this. You have a lot of other chains that have already been doing this.
you.
But what was incredible about the Ethereum merge is that Ethereum wasn't proof of stake to begin with. And at the size of Ethereum,
Mhm.
merging that much, having that much risk in terms of completely changing your consensus mechanism
Mm-hmm.
in a backwards compatible way where you don't lose the history of your chain and transactions, um, that's sort of a big deal. And so
That is.
the Ethereum historic state, I think the EHS or whatever, the Ethereum historic state was completely unchanged and it was a very smooth ride. Basically, if you imagine, you sort of think of like a wire, right? You have like a cable, and inside of the cable you have like the Ethereum historic record, but you have this outside coding, right? Or this outside layer. And so the middle layer of like the actual record, your transaction history, your balances, all of that, that was unchanged. What was changed is sort of what it's wrapped in. And so they actually deployed the new code a while ago, and they've been upgrading it ever since. They've upgraded test nets to it as testing. They've launched new test nets with it. And so they've, at a certain block, it was like in the code that it would switch to the new wrapping. So it would switch from the old proof of work layer, consensus mechanism layer, to the new proof of stake consensus mechanism layer. And ultimately it was seamless. And so at whatever exact block, the code shifted. And then every new block after that was proof of stake. It was done by the new layers. And so this was pretty miraculous because the other chains never had to go through that process, right? They sort of just
Right. Yeah.
out of the gate had chosen their consensus mechanism. And so what Ethereum pulled off was really, really cool.
Yeah. And just for purpose of comparison, Ethereum today has a market cap of $152 billion. So it's a pretty legitimate entity.
Yeah.
It's not $5 or $10 we're talking about. It's
Right.
a legitimate entity. And trading activity, you had 20 billion in volume today, but 8 out of 10 people were buying it, which means that they think that it's a good deal. Because just like with stocks, when people, more people buy than sell, they see the price as a buying opportunity, and they buy it hoping that they'll make money. So when you see 83-84% of people are buying it and not too many people are selling it, that it's probably due to probably the merge. And then Biden made some comments today, so people are feeling good about Ethereum and blockchain.
Right.
Just for the purpose of clarification, proof of work is when you have a transaction, say on a blockchain, and it has to go throughout the complete chain, because when one thing changes, everything changes. And that can take, if you do a transaction, it can take a little while. It can take a few hours, Alex. Am I correct? Before everything can be verified.
It should probably, on Bitcoin, it takes maybe 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was way off on that one. Okay. But with Ethereum, with proof of stake, where you have stakeholders that say, hey, you know what, I'll vouch for this transaction. I can cover this. And that's pretty much how it goes, right? With proof of stake, that you have stakeholders that vouch for the transaction. So it's more instantaneous.
Right. The network, updating the network is not really the slow part. It's really just managing queue. So when you have like a bunch of validators and they're all competing for each transaction, then you're in proof of work, you're dealing with congestion, right? So when you have congestion and you sort of have like one transaction at a time, like that's really difficult because the whole network is tied up to do that. Okay. And that's why Bitcoin and old Ethereum were so slow. It would take quite a while and sometimes really expensive. At times of high congestion, gas fees skyrocketed on Ethereum because if things were congested, you want your transaction to go through quicker. So then sort of the market rate of what the gas fee is will go up, because then miners are going to be more inclined, incentivized to pick up your transaction. And that sort of picks it up, right? And now gas fees haven't really gone down a ton. But the reality is that it's a lot more efficient and you don't have that same sort of competition.
Hmm.
Um, and so you are dealing with a much more efficient system. And that's why we're going to go, as they keep upgrading certain parts of the code, you're going to see, 70, 100,000 transactions a second, as opposed to,
And it, and
four. Yeah.
and the way it is now, it's more scalable,
Right.
which I guess is something you want to have in every business,
Right.
particularly financial transactions.
Right.
So it's much more scalable than it was before,
Yeah.
because of the congestion problem isn't as big a deal as it was before.
Right. It's more expensive to attack. So it's harder to tamper with. It's more censorship
Hmm.
resistant.
Hmm.
Vitalik's described this as, miners being they're being easier to identify because you're sort of staking into it. They're not just random validators on somebody's random computer, right? You have a stake in dealing with, being a validator.
Hmm.
Um, and the energy efficiency thing is, we should not to belabor it, but when it switched over, global energy usage dropped 0.2%. um
Hmm.
so that's kind of puts it in perspective, like terms of energy usage for a network that large, that many people using it has an impact over
Right.
time
It does.
on energy.
Yeah.
So it's
And
it's
I think that's one of the reasons that, and I could be wrong, is that why China shut down a lot of the miners because of energy concerns? Was that one of the reasons, or was it something else?
China doesn't really have energy concerns.
Okay. Okay.
China's got access to extremely cheap energy, a lot like Russia, right? They both sort of share certain natural resources, and in the northern part of that of Russia, really.
Okay.
Um, so it's energy is extremely cheap in China and Russia, which is why you sort of had a mining problem.
Okay.
You have a lot of miners in Russia illegally, you have a lot of miners in China illegally, and the reason is because energy is so cheap that there's a huge incentive for them to do it. They're not really
Do it.
spending a lot
Okay.
of money to get it,
Okay.
and they're getting a ton of money, right? And so really China came down to for them it's a matter of control. It's a matter of surveillance. So
Mhm.
if they can't control the monetary system and they can't control the digital ecosystem, then they start losing control as a state, and that's ultimately why.
Okay. That's why. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know, regulation. There's a lot of talk of regulation now. I think people finally, our decision makers finally realize that, Bitcoin, Ethereum, cryptocurrency, decentralized finance is not going anywhere. It's here to stay. And I think, you know, um, regulation is going to benefit everybody. The right type of regulation, I think, will be
Right.
beneficial to everyone, because it will ensure that, you don't get ripped off. You know, and,
Yeah, it's if it's informed properly, right? And I think
yeah,
that's where the White House is doing a good job right now. They don't have it all correct, and certainly the SEC and folks don't. But
mhm,
um, the way that these executive orders are reading is a lot more like optimistic and understanding of the fact that it's emerging technology that they do need to understand the right way.
mhm,
And so it's sort of giving permission out to all of the right or relevant agencies to do the hard work of understanding it
mhm.
before they go ahead and put pen to paper in terms of what to do about it.
Right.
So I think that's an important step.
And I think they have to get some younger people involved, because if you
Right.
ever look at the SEC and the board of governors, and they're all over 60 or 70, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Not saying that's a bad thing, but I just don't know if they're really equipped to really understand, um, decentralized finance the way, somebody who's grown up with it that's 35 or 40 years old would, you know.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think, because I think the nature of a lot of those positions is you get appointed and you're like pretty much there for life, or you get a 8-year term or whatever. And I don't know if there's a lot of incentive for them to understand it, because a lot of them are probably on the downside of their careers. So I would like to see, maybe I'll write my congresswoman. I would like to see some younger people that really understand this technology get a little more involved,
Right. Yeah.
because the regulation is going to be key to the survival of Bitcoin and Ethereum and the blockchain. Because I think what happens, a lot of people have attacked Bitcoin. A lot of big money guys. I won't call any names, but there's some billionaires that they don't really, they're not too crazy. Money managers, they're not too crazy about Bitcoin because it's a different way of doing things, and they pretty much got a lock and understanding on the way you can do things now.
Right.
This kind of upsets the apple cart to a degree.
Right.
So I think a lot of them are reluctant to want to see this change because they won't be in charge. They won't be able to control everything the way they did before.
Right. And that's why, in terms of like this new White House framework, these executive orders, what inspired some of this, I think, was the bipartisan committee of a few regulators who do understand it. And what they called it was a space race of digital assets. And part of that urgency, of course, are more centralized CBDCs or central banking digital currencies. But the reality is that there's an urgency from some people in the government and lots of people in the finance sector for us to catch up, because you have probably about at least 50 that we know of, other countries currently working on releasing their own digital dollars or their own CBDCs. And when you have that kind of push, the U.S. historically has wanted to be at the forefront of that in terms of innovation and utilizing the fact that we have a lot of the tech giants here and we have a lot of the knowledge here to do a better job and set the regulatory frameworks that should be used to set sort of the high standards of that technology. And this is an opportunity for us. We are at this crossroads right now where the government can either sort of keep dragging their feet and not picking a direction and not picking an attitude and sort of like aimlessly reacting to things however they feel in the moment, or we could go to the direction of an extremely organized way of approaching this and spurring innovation,
Right.
while also creating those safety mechanisms that protect mom and dad and your grandparents and your cousins from the fact that there's a lot of people taking advantage of the hype right now to take advantage of other people. And so how do we prevent that while also not sort of stifling that important innovation that our country has historically been pretty good at?
Yeah. And, I think, sort of the backdrop for this, the world economic system as it is now, the dollar is probably not as strong as it used to be. I mean, it used to be the only game in town. It's not the only game in town now. It's still the currency of preference for countries to keep their money in. But that could be changing, because now it's Russia, China, South Africa. There's 5 or 6 countries that do a lot of business with each other now, in currency other than dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get the other 2. It's Russia, China, South Africa, and there's 2 more. But the total GDP of these 5 countries is equal to the GDP of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very legitimate. It's a very legitimate challenge to what we're doing now.
Right.
And if we don't, in terms of a digital currency, it has to be the same throughout the world. You can't have, the days when you get $1 and a yen and this and this and this and it floats and all that. I don't think that's where we're at now, because on Bitcoin, on the blockchain, Bitcoin is worth the same thing here that it is at the tip of South America, that it is in the Arctic, that it is in Russia, that it is in China, that it is everywhere. And each country's particular currency or digital currency they would come up with would not exactly be the same, would not hold the same value. And so I think one of the advantages of cryptocurrency or the blockchain and Bitcoin in particular, or Ethereum too, is that it sort of stabilizes this.
Right.
And I don't think the United States, I mean, we have a lot of assets, but I don't know if we'll be able to control this like we did like we do the present economic system.
Right.
Would you
Yeah.
agree?
If other countries let's imagine a scenario where
Mm-hmm.
a handful of other countries beat us by, let's say, three or 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they put together an entire new digital highway, the new sort of economic internet,
Mm-hmm.
and they're bypassing Swift. They're creating, like, immediate atomic settlement. They're creating immediate swaps. They're like creating immediate settlement of commodities. They sort of even made the entire purpose of futures sort of moot, right? They've sort of
Mm-hmm.
solved a lot of these financial issues, and they're exchanging with each other at lightning speed, full transparency, using fully stabilized digital assets by their own state issued or bank issued digital currencies, and we're out of the loop. I mean, that severely threatens our ability to compete in that arena, for our institutions to compete and participate. Um, and so it creates sort of a situation that America hasn't been in a lot of times.
Yeah.
And we don't want to miss it, especially looking at um, the current economic system as it
Right.
is,
Right.
right? Uh, it's not something that we'd want to endure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think one of the things that's driving this is that at one time, Great Britain controlled about 1/3 of the world. When I say control, I mean the economy, everything. They controlled 1/3 of the world, and then they kind of faded away. But what they did was they got a bunch of diamonds and gold from Africa and India, and they store it. They have probably one of the biggest gold reserves, I believe, that exists on Earth. Because they will show you their reserves. The United States won't show you their reserves, so I don't know. Maybe there's something there. But one of the things that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin does, it makes that whole colonial history of acquiring wealth null and void.
right.
And I think that's why you see a lot of countries, mostly smaller countries, are starting to go that way already.
Right.
What was it? Is it Argentina,
El Salvador.
El Salvador,
Yeah.
and I think Ethiopia has declared itself, a cryptocurrency country where their currency of
Estonia.
choice
Yeah.
is,
Different countries. Yeah.
yeah, they have a currency that they prefer. And it's funny because even in the Ukrainian war, how money has been getting to the people is they've been doing airdrops to their phones with
Right.
cryptocurrency so they can buy food and pay bills and do things like that.
Right.
So I think cryptocurrency has it's going to have implications that we're not fully aware of now. But I think the world economic system is really changing. And it used
Yeah.
to be it started with mercantilism and it continued with capitalism. You acquired as much gold as you could, and you kept everyone else owing you more than you owed them, so the balance of trade was always in your favor. And what happens, and how that ends up is you get a few people in a few countries that pretty much own everything, and the rest of the world is like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't working too good for us. You know,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I think cryptocurrency, we always talk about the reversal of ownership, and it's decentralized. So there is no, the royal family. The royal family has so much money. It's like they own a lot. They own a lot of gold. They own a lot of property.
They're still wearing the jewels that they've stolen
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
from people, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
from
still
Africa and
it's
India, all their
still
gold
part
is
of,
from
yeah.
Africa. Yeah, Africa and India, all their gold and diamonds.
Yeah.
And people are now saying we want our stuff back.
Right.
You don't mine any diamonds, you don't mine any gold, but see, the system that existed allowed them, the colonialism allowed them to go in and take everything,
Right.
and it started, pre-capitalism with Spain. They stole so much gold from South America that the ships would sink.
Yeah.
They said, okay, come on, just a few more pieces, and quite a number of the ships would sink before they could get back to Spain
Right.
because they were so weighted down with gold. But what cryptocurrency does, it makes gold kind of like obsolete. The value of gold now will be on circuit boards and not on hoarding.
Right. And spacecraft and things like that,
Spacecraft,
right?
yeah.
It creates utility, right?
Yeah.
So previously, sort of our storages of wealth were just that, right? They were just sort of a store. It was sort of like an idea. It was like a storage of wealth in some sort of concrete, tangible thing that you could hold and touch and weigh, right? But it didn't like do anything, and
Right.
and it was sort of just arbitrarily decided by certain people, sometimes certain industries. If you look at diamonds, for example, like things were sort of created as storages of wealth,
Yes,
and it was done so because of the inequitable system. It was possible because of that system. And of course, things like gold are scarce things, and so the scarcity of it also creates value inherently. But what things like Bitcoin and now Ethereum and all these other things do differently is they give you actual utility for the things in your life that matter, and so it creates utility that we all have equal access and ownership to. And so that's sort of the amazing thing, is as we continue to move more into a digital economy and a digital future, we're not getting further away from being digital. It's something that I kind of say a lot, is like, do you look forward in 10 years? Do you see us being like less reliant on technology? Of course not. So when you follow that trajectory of a reliance on technology, our integration with technology, the seamlessness of it, what is the domain that we will always be working in? Or will predominantly be working in the domain of digital assets and digital things and digital exchange of goods and services and content. This conversation is being delivered in a digital format. It's not us sitting in your living room on your couch, holding your hand through this conversation. This is, and so when you think about how you live and work and learn and read and stay up to date and communicate, when you think of all those things in our lives that we do more and more in a digital way, what is the exchange of that data? What does the exchange of that data look like? Historically, the exchange of that data has always been through centralized entities still, who profit off of that, their unfair advantage in the middle to provide the service, right? And if we can create networks and systems just peer-to-peer between ourselves, where the rules and the infrastructure and all of that is created only for our benefit because it's created by us for us, then you have much more equitable systems where you don't have this incentivized path to inequity again.
Right. And there's so many things that we've created to store wealth. And one in particular is art. Is art. And I always thought art was a good place to store money, but I had someone tell me that art is just a good way to launder money.
Right.
Because if I sell you a painting for $400 million, I mean, that I did, who's to say what that painting's worth?
Right. Yeah.
If you're willing to pay $400 million for it and I'm willing to sell it to you for that, then that's what it's worth. Now, it could be worth $50. And, it could be a way for you to, cook the books and me to cook the books. And apparently a lot of that goes on
right.
in the art world. It's no big secret. With digital currency, cryptocurrency, though, everything is verifiable.
Right.
When there's money stored on the blockchain, it's verifiable. Another problem that digital currency will correct is rehypothecated treasuries, rehypothecated gold. And what that means is that Alex can take $10 million in gold that he has in a vault somewhere that nobody's actually seen, but take his word for it, it's there. And he can loan that $10 million out 10 different times.
Right.
And as long as two people don't ask for the gold at the same time, then he's good to go. And he can
Yeah.
collect interest 10 times on some gold that he may or may not have.
Yeah.
Same thing with treasuries. They do rehypothecated treasuries where you acquire some treasuries and you can loan the treasuries out to 6 or 7 different people, the same treasuries.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as long as nobody calls the treasuries in and wants the treasuries, then you're good to go. Which really is like fake money. When you have rehypothecated gold futures, it's kind of like
Right.
fake money. You can turn it into cash, but it's not. It's kind of like fake money and
It's virtualization, right?
virtualization.
It's what Marx called fictitious capital.
Yeah,
You're
fictitious
sort of just
capital.
creating this idea of
Yeah,
capital
yeah,
based on
yeah,
it's
yeah,
leveraging, right? You're saying
yeah.
I'm good for something.
Right, right,
You've got my word on it. We'll just
mhm,
create capital where we can
right.
out of thin air so that we can do the rich people things we want to do to make more capital and then do it
Yeah,
all over
yeah,
again.
yeah. And this kind of goes against um, the capitalistic system and capitalism, because just like the whole stock market, for instance. You have a company now, which shall remain nameless, that's never made a profit, but it's worth over $200 billion.
Right.
Now, you
Who
explain that to
knows?
me because they said, well, we think they're going to make money in the future. Well,
Right.
now it's questionable whether they really are going to make that kind of money in the future.
Right.
So, securities, stocks, are it's speculation.
But the stakeholders have
Okay.
made out with all the buybacks. So,
The stakeholders make out, yeah. The stakeholders make out, man. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. But the small investors, they get screwed every time.
Yep. The people who downloaded Robinhood and were like, look at this graph.
Yeah, yeah,
They don't even know that Robinhood itself is betting against them on the back end of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of a lot of digital currency. There's a lot of people who've lost a lot of money with a lot of these, you know, crazy coins, I call them,
Crazy
cryptocurrency,
coins.
that weren't really worth anything and weren't based on anything. Bitcoin value comes from the fact that there's only a limited amount and they're scarce.
Right.
Sheep, you just make more and more and more and more. So it can never go up past a certain point. I think you get like, what, a billion of them for $50 an hour or something. It's some ridiculous amount. So they just keep making more and more. So the price is never going to be able to go past a certain point because
It's
they'll
in
just,
yeah, they're inflationary. So
yeah,
people don't think about the fact that every second you go holding those things, they're inherently by design are losing value
losing value. Yeah, 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 yeah,
and making it even harder for them to ever reach whatever price goals you want them
yeah,
to get to.
yeah.
It's the network itself is working against you, just sprinting off money against you,
Yeah,
and
it
you're
is.
just holding on because some billionaire tweeted about it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And when he tweets and the price goes up, that's when you better sell it because he's going to sell
Yeah, because
his.
that's
He's
what
going
he's
to.
doing. Yeah.
That's what he's doing. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah.
Right.
But I think with with cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's a storage of wealth. Bitcoin is more of a storage of wealth, where Ethereum is more of a utility.
Right.
It's a blockchain and a coin. Look at Web3, for instance. The
Right.
metaverse that exists on the Ethereum blockchain. So it's a coin, not just a coin, but it's a system, a blockchain that has value because of what it can do.
Right.
You know, you can have 50 tons of gold, and it really can't do a whole lot. You can use it for electronic circuits, and it never rusts. So hey, maybe we should make cars out of gold, so you could keep it for 50 years and they would never rust. But
Yeah.
it's too scarce to do that. But other than that utility, just hoarding it or keeping it for its value, it really has no utility. And so I think in the long run, that's what makes Ethereum probably more desirable, and certainly Bitcoin a place to store your wealth.
Right. Well, I
And
mean, what we're facing right now is, they literally just announced another rate hike, right? And so you're seeing sort of the traditional system keep trying to slap band-aids on itself and like hoping to ward
right,
off the next 2008 or whatever is coming.
mhm,
And ultimately just sort of holding that
yeah,
process off, right? But
yeah,
at the end of the day, um where these new technologies come into play is, after the pain of the next couple of years or whatever, what comes next? What does that look like? And if you look at where all of our institutions are moving, and you look at where all of our regulatory frameworks are focusing, you look at executive orders where even the White House itself has to address what is happening and what they need to do about it. And you
hmm
look at the global movement of, all these countries working on their own digital currencies, it's unmistakable that if you're not on board yet, you're going to look back in a few years, again, which is, I feel like, a cycle that happens every few years when people
hmm
say this is dumb, and then they look back and they're like, I guess it made sense.
yeah.
In a 2 or
But
3
they
years
tell
right
you
now, it's
it's
a
dumb.
quiet
They tell
moment.
you it's dumb, but yet and still they're buying it.
Right.
They
Yeah.
say, "Don't buy it,"
But it's a quiet moment right now because, of the market conditions. Of course, you hear less about things sort of when people aren't becoming billionaires overnight, but
hmm
the reality is this is building season. There's a ton of work being done. My company's doing a lot of work. People are working on this stuff,
hmm
actually building it. And
hmm
in this building season is when we're getting ready for what is the next direction this thing goes,
hmm
and everybody is focused on that question. And so you can either weather it without the excitement of what that next chapter looks like, or you can, sort of hop in, join it, understand it, care about it, be excited about it with us. Those are your two options, because
Right,
the
right, right.
traditional market itself is not going to have a good couple of years.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
that's
reality
true.
of it.
That's true. And I don't know. People talk about, oh, the metaverse, the metaverse, the metaverse, and it was sort of a novelty at first. It still is, but in terms of long-term viability, I think we're kind of like figuring our way through the metaverse of how it's gonna, you know, what the relevancy is gonna be in life. I mean, it's cool to go in a virtual reality and see things and do things and go into a bar and go order some barbecue at a virtual barbecue joint and have it delivered to you. So that's pretty cool. But what is the real utility of it? And I think we're kind of working our way through that. You know.
I stopped by. So we actually have an NFT gallery in Chicago now called I'm Not Art. And my wife and I just stopped by it recently over this past weekend, and you kind of could go either way. It could either be really corny or it could like be really interesting. And luckily, it ended up being really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They're holding a lot of like physical events there, and they
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of like important real world partnerships with companies like CoinFlip, which have Bitcoin ATMs, brands, musicians, etc. Um, and he was walking me through sort of, they have these big screens everywhere, and he was walking me through like the metaverse like buildings that they have. And so you have this exact replica pretty much of the gallery building,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have exact replicas of like the coin flip headquarters, and you can sort of have like mixed media and like mixed in person with virtual events with people in other places. Like you have like actual video feeds on some walls or in some windows, you have like
Mm-hmm.
the virtual spaces and others, and it's creating like augmentation to our real lives in meaningful and interesting ways.
Okay.
Let's say I'm a an artist, I'm a musician, and I'm releasing a new album. They have like a whole back patio area with all these other screens too, and you can augment all of those experiences with sort of these complementary virtual spaces. And then if you can't make it physically, you can also just join the virtual space, right? And so you sort of create, what it does is it adds a lot of enrichment, a lot of layers to our
Mm-hmm.
existence as human bodies, obviously.
Right. And it's great entertainment too. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
great entertainment, and it's a great experience.
Right.
I could see it being used to, if you want to do an experiment, maybe do it in the metaverse first. If you want to do a social experiment
Right.
or another kind of experiment, maybe you do it in the metaverse first and see how it works.
Yeah.
And then those lessons that you learn from there could be applied to real life. I mean, I'd love to go back to 1968 and be at the Rolling Stones Stevie Wonder concert at the Akron Bowl. I think that'd be pretty cool. Or the Temptations and the Miracles Battle of the Bands. I think that'd be a pretty cool
Yeah.
something to experience.
Right.
So I guess it has entertainment value, but much like gaming, gaming has kind of gone on to something else other than just playing games.
Right.
It has other utility now. Um,
Yeah.
where you can actually take characters from games. You can actually learn to fly a plane in the metaverse before you fly a real plane. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think Web 3 is sort of in its infancy, just like what computers were. I remember, when computers first came out, I had a wow, it was a basic computer. It was a I think I may still have it. It was a Nintendo where you had a cartridge you could program in BASIC, and you had Pac-Man game, and you had about two or three games. Well, now computers are a lot more sophisticated. Then it was sort of a novelty.
Hmm.
You can say, "Oh God, look, I wrote this program for a game," and it wouldn't be very sophisticated, but it was sort of a novelty. And you look at them now, and they pretty much run the world.
Right.
So I see the metaverse and Web 3 as sort of being in its infancy, which is, if you are a capitalist, if you want to make money, you got to get in early. you know. But I think it has implications that we're probably not fully aware of yet.
Right.
It may not be, for a while. Much like computers, I mean, it's, I remember I had a calculator back in the mid 70s. And the calculator was like $600. And I was like, me and two other guys went in and bought one. So we used to share it, because and $600 was a lot of money back then. It's like a computer,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
And we never dreamed that pretty soon, calculator would be on our phone, or navigation, maps. We used to use maps to travel, now. So I think Web 3 the same way. I think we're sort of in the infancy, and like you say, the NFT building. I think it's a great place to become educated
Hmm.
about what it can do.
Right.
You
Look
know,
beyond the headlines, look beyond the scams, look beyond
right?
meaningless things and
Hmm.
see how is this like impacting like real artists or like real people's lives to create new ways of connecting with audiences, to connect with each other,
Hmm.
to connect with their work, to connect with their communities, right? Like how is it being used there, right? And I think that's where you see the value. And
Right.
unfortunately, those aren't the type of things that hit every headline. But I think that's where the real work is being done. That's where there's real people spending large amounts of their lives
Hmm.
like creating things that are meaningful.
Yeah. One of the things that one of the implications, you try to look down the road a bit, that I think the blockchain could have implications in voting, voting on the
Right.
blockchain.
Yeah.
Everybody's concerned about too much money in politics.
Mm-hmm.
They're going in, trying to put bugs in voting machines now. If you vote on a blockchain, so everybody gets one vote. There's a ledger that can't be manipulated, so you actually have more confidence that the outcome is really the outcome.
Right.
I'm not saying that I doubt the outcome, but I'm saying I think that would put that argument to rest.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have a bunch of people in a room counting paper ballots.
Yeah, yeah. So hanging Chad, is that good?
Yeah.
No, still hanging on one
Yeah.
side
You
there.
don't have people walking in the back door voting, and carrying out boxes of stuff.
Yeah, man.
You don't have it.
Yeah, it's pretty
So,
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, back to the Ethereum merge, I think, we're in the early stages of a new technology,
Right.
and we'll look back on this, in 10 years, because the thing about technology is it kind of goes slow, but then something will happen and just
Hmm.
kind of really speeds up. I think about how the MP3 revolutionized the music business. I've
Hmm.
been in the music business for a while, not so much now as I used to be. But, one of the things that happened was, you had records, then you had digital audio tape, then you had CDs, and then somebody came out with an MP3, Steve Jobs. An
Hmm.
MP3 pretty much made CDs obsolete.
Right.
It made tape obsolete. And now you have the MP3 on your phone. So I think a lot of time technology goes along real slow, and all of a sudden something gets invented, and it just kind of takes leaps and bounds. And it goes places where you really never anticipated.
Right.
And I could see, particularly the metaverse now, people, digital real estate is the latest hot thing now. But I could see the time when, probably it has implications far beyond digital real estate. You know,
Right.
so yeah, I think this it's an exciting time to be um, messing with technology, man. But you gotta really understand it. You have to kind of understand how it works, because before, I think in society before, you didn't. When I came along, it was like go to college so you'll be able to get a good job. And now it's like you better learn the code so you'll understand what the hell is going on.
Right.
So I think people have to become educated about it, not just how it works, but they have to become more technical. You know,
Yeah.
and as far as being able to, you know, write a white paper, create a cryptocurrency or create something that functions on Ethereum. So I
Yeah.
kind of think that's where we're headed. But
Thomas Piketty and or Pickett. Yeah. No, I think it was Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab in the Fourth Industrial Revolution describes the
mm-hmm,
real gap um, between classes or between people, the
mm-hmm,
real equity gap moving into this into the future, the technical future, is not going to be a matter of like who has money and who doesn't. It's going to be a matter of who has technical knowledge and who doesn't. It's
right,
it's really a matter of who
yeah,
controls the technology and who's
mm-hmm,
sort of controlled by it.
right. Because if you have technical knowledge, then you're not a bystander. You're a
Right.
participant. And I think that's everybody wants to be a participant in making 50 million bucks, but
Yeah. You
if
have autonomy. You have that autonomy
you have
because you
autonomy,
know
yep,
how
yep,
it works. Yeah.
yep. So okay, well, this is a complicated subject, and although we're not going to solve it tonight, I think we made some great strides and maybe told you something that you didn't know. Again, this is the DeFi Collective. Our email is show@the I'm Robert Vaughn. This is Alex Jewell. Let us hear from you. So until next week, have a great week. I used to say wear your mask. Maybe I can go back to saying that now, because but anyway, have a great week. Study your coding, learn about the blockchain, and you won't be left behind. Any closing thoughts, Alex?
I think we hit it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.